Brian, as anything, there is a starting point to every journey, and that when we're getting into spring football, figure a good way to end this podcast is to rank the position groups heading into spring. Because as a next step, I'm sure we'll rank the position groups coming out of spring as far as how they
Mhm.
progressed and with the trajectory and all those things in between. So we're going to do this in ascending order, I guess, right? Yep,
Yeah,
working from 5 to
from
1.
5
So
to
we're
1.
gonna yep, an ascending order here.
And it
Yes.
only focuses on what's on the team for the spring.
Right.
So, like at safety, we don't include Rod Hurd. We don't
Mhm.
include Bronte Johnson. We don't include Tabron Benny Powell.
Right.
At cornerback, we don't include Leonard Moore and Carson Hobbs, et cetera, et cetera. It's only the
Yep.
guys that are here now. So when I did receiver rankings, I didn't include Bo Collins. It's the
Mhm.
guys, it's for the spring. It's where they
Right.
are going into the spring, not projecting what I think is going to happen or we think is going to happen, but where they are right now. And it's
Right.
going to be a combination of what we know, meaning, production and what we've seen, and then talent and depth.
Mhm.
That's where it's at. So we're going to go 5 to 1. And then
Yep.
at the end of that, I promised yesterday I would rank all 10 offense and defense, Ryan. So
Okay.
we'll see if if you're able to do that or not. But I had the
Yeah.
advantage of having a whole extra day of preparation for that ranking than Ryan did.
Right.
But let's go defense. Let's go 5 to 1, Ryan.
Okay.
My number 5 group right now, the group that I think is the biggest question mark is safety. So as you said, safety, corner, linebacker, DN, D tackle are the 5 position groups.
Yep.
Safety for me is the clear number 5 because of the fact you're thin on numbers. Outside of Xavier Watts, very questionable about who is going to be able to step up and play this year. It's
Yep.
wild to me, however, that the position that I have the least confidence in as a group is the one with the unanimous All-American coming back. That
Yep.
that says a lot about the question marks beside him, but it also says a lot about how good the other positions are, top to
Sure.
bottom, in
Yep.
my opinion.
Yep. I had safety at number 5 too. Looking at my list, it same thing you said, Brian. I mean, there you have one proven commodity and a whole lot of question marks there. Now,
Mhm.
doesn't mean there's not. It's funny because every one of these groups have a lot of talent, right? A whole lot of talent, and
Mhm.
I'm curious to see what it does look like coming out of the spring. But I think right now, I mean, again, can a Don Schuler be that guy? It's possible. Can Ben Minnick be that guy? We'll see. Can Luke Talich be that guy? It's possible, right? But ultimately, you are just trying to figure it out outside of Xavier Watts and then Rod Hurd obviously not being here as well. Will keep that question marks there for safety position. I think it's still a position of high upside, but heading into the spring, there obviously are a lot of question marks. Your number 4 would be on the defensive side of the ball.
It would be linebacker.
Okay.
Love the talent at linebacker. The ceiling is very high. This is a group that, maybe some point in time could be in the conversation for number 1, but what it comes down to for me, Ryan, is just the lack of proven production from this group compared to other positions. When you look at it, Jack Kaiser comes back with a lot of proven production. I actually have it in the article I put out. Jack Kaiser has 185 career tackles, 11 career tackles for loss, 4 sacks, 4 interceptions, 6 breakups, and 4 forced fumbles. He's taken 2 interceptions back for touchdowns. After that, the entire linebacking core only has 47 career tackles. 7 of those were from Kahanu Kia 2 years ago, and he's been away from football for the last 2 years. So while I love the production, it's the unknowns that are have this group lower. It's the unknowns of, is Drake Bowen going to step up? Is Jalen Steen going to step up? Is Jade? I mean, it's we don't know. That's the thing is there's a
Right.
lot of unknowns about this group. And if this was just a ranking of talent, it's probably going to rank higher.
Sure.
But based on the expectations of what we know and who has the biggest question marks going into spring, that's why I have linebacker number 4.
Okay.
What's
I
yours?
actually had I actually had defensive end at number 4 because I am just a little bit down on the room in general right this second because of Jordan Botelho not taking a massive step forward. So I might have a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth, but I look at this defensive end rotation and roster potentially. I think it could be really, really good in 2024. But that's dependent on a lot of things going right now, right? Like RJ Oben, I think he's going to be really good for Notre Dame. But you know what? I've never seen RJ Oben in a Notre Dame uniform. Have never seen that before. Jordan Botelho was a very big disappointment this past year. Outside of that, we're talking about guys that have barely played. Bubakar, what'd you say, 27 snaps? Like he just hasn't played much. Jordan Botelho played a little. I mean, I'm sorry, Joshua Burnham played a little bit last year, but you need him to take a massive step forward. The defensive end position in general has a lot of talent, but not a lot of proven talent, especially
Right.
in a Notre Dame uniform when
Yeah.
I'm talking about RJ Oben. So I let them at number 4. I guess because not to
Yeah.
push too far forward, but I actually have linebacker at number 3, so it's not like we're too far off, I would
I
assume,
had
on this
D end
one.
at number 3, Ryan. So
Right.
like and
Exactly.
it's close. And the only reason that I went with D end ahead of linebacker is this. There's still a lot more proven production. Josh Burnham has played a lot more meaningful snaps than Drake Bowen or Jaden Osbury.
Sure.
Right? Like Junior Tuihalamaka has played a lot more meaningful snaps than those guys. Yes,
Mhm.
you are absolutely correct. We don't know how RJ Open is going to play in this defense because it's not just a different uniform. It's they're
Yeah.
going to ask him to play the game differently than he did at
Sure.
Duke as well. So there's that
Yep.
part of it also. But I'm still more certain of knowing what RJ Open can do in college than what Drake Bowen or Jaden Osbury or Jalen Steed can do. That's where it came down to for me. I
Yep.
think where I had trouble with this one, Ryan, is because the elite talent at both positions is similar. The
Mhm.
top level talent of Bubakar and Bryce Young and Josh Burnham to me is as good as the top level talent of Kingston William Asa, Drake Bowen, and Jaden Osbury. The difference and why I put linebacker, where I think you can make a case for linebacker was I'm more confident that Drake, Kingston, and Jaden will get to the level to be able to help this year than I am Bubakar and Bryce Young. That's
Right.
what made it a battle for me. But at the end of the day,
Yep.
yes, Jordan Patel was disappointing last year, but we know that he can be a starting defensive player in a top 5 defense because he already was. Right. That's kind of where I come from. It's the
Sure.
known quality. I'll say this. If the linebacking core does not, in my view, leap the defensive ends by the end of the spring, I'm going to be a little concerned.
Right.
Right? Because I think we should have more of those unknown answers by the end of the spring at this
Mhm.
point in time. But yes, our 3 and 4 the same, just flipped. I'm curious
Yep.
to see if we have so we're going to have the same 1 and 2,
Mhm.
but I don't know what the order is going to be, Ryan. So I'm going to let you kick off with who
Yep.
is your number 2 position group on defense.
Number 2 for me is cornerback. I believe that you have a very proven commodity, obviously, in Benjamin Morrison. You know who he is. I do think that there's still parts of his game that do need to take a next step, but regardless, talking about a kid that is an all-American level cover man. So you have him and you have a lot of talent outside of him, but it is relatively unproven talents. Like you've seen Christian Gray flash, but you've never seen him in a starting role, obviously. You've seen Jaden Mickey do a lot of good things in 2023 after the struggles in 2022. There are proven commodities, but also you still need to figure out, are they ready to be in that limelight and to be able to be that guy on Notre Dame? So I just went overall defensive tackle. I think is a little bit more proven at the top than what cornerback
Yeah.
is from a full capacity, but it was another interesting conversation for sure.
So I also had cornerback number 2. Now, for
Okay.
me, and I believe it's the case for you, Ryan, I count the nickel position as corners
Yeah. Yeah.
in
Essentially.
this
Oh, yeah.
defense. So you look at
Mhm.
Benjamin Morrison coming back. If Benjamin Morrison simply just repeats what he did as a sophomore, he's a
Yeah.
second to third team All-American caliber player, in my
Mhm.
opinion. Like just
Yeah.
be the same dude you are. That's the floor for him.
Sure.
If he takes a sophomore to junior jump, which I think I've always kind of found that, like, especially with skill players, you can junior years when you really see that big jump. And I think a perfect example is what Denzel Burke did this past year.
Sure.
Really good freshman year, took a step back as a sophomore because people saw more film of him, and he just wasn't physically strong enough to really overcome how teams counter to go at him.
Right.
Junior year, Denzel, much better player than he was as a sophomore.
No doubt.
Well, Benjamin's now entering into that junior season status where I think now physically he's going to be so much stronger. And I broke down last week, Ryan, is that just getting stronger has a significant impact on how Benjamin Morrison plays the game because that play strength at the line and throughout routes is going to
Yeah.
be a lot better. There were times that guys just could kind of outsize him at times, not often, but at times this season. Another year of a good jump in the weight room, and all of a sudden his functional strength is better. That
Yeah.
alone, if that's the only thing that improves for Benjamin Morrison this year, he goes from a third team All American caliber player to a first-team All-American caliber player. So he could be that good. We need to see it. Jordan Clark is a veteran, proven player. After that, there's a lot of uncertainty. I
Yep.
love the talent, and we've seen the talent play more in more money situations than we've seen from the linebackers. You say, well, Christian Gray hasn't played a lot, and Jaden Mickey hasn't played a lot, like Drake Bone. Yeah, but we've seen those two guys step into big money situations where it's like game on the line. They
Yep.
had to play early against teams. Like we saw against Pitt, for example, where Benjamin's hurt, misses the entire game. Cam goes out in early second quarter, late first quarter. And Pitt has a receiver named Bub Means who just was one of the big surprises of the combine. Didn't he run like a low 4.4? Pretty
Yeah.
good sized guy.
Yeah.
And Jaden Mickey and Christian Gray shut that receiving core down.
Yeah.
I mean, just locked. Now, it helped that the quarterback wasn't very good, but you watched the game. They were step to step with those guys. I mean, it wasn't like, oh, man, if they had a better quarterback, they might have been in trouble. It wouldn't have mattered. Wouldn't have mattered who the quarterback was. And so we've seen them have to be that guy where we've never seen Drake be in that situation before. And so that's why the confidence level is there. And I also just think that's a position where just God-given ability can take the way that Notre Dame plays defense at cornerback. It's much easier for a really talented sophomore corner to make a smooth transition than it is for a really talented but unproven linebacker.
Sure.
Because it's just, dude, go do your job. Christian, cover that guy. Use your technique, cover that guy. Where Drake, it's like, okay, you've got to use your technique and do this, do that, but you've got to make sure that the defensive line is lined up correctly. You've got to make the line checks. You've got to do this. You've got to do that. You've got to, there's just so much more to it than that. And that's why there's a little bit of a different conversation for me. But cornerback to me is clear. There for me, Ryan, is separation between 1 and 2 and the other 3. There's
Agreed.
like 5 is easy 5. There's a gap between 5 and the next 2. Those are kind of interchangeable. And then there's another gap between 1 and 2.
Yep.
Defensive tackle, both of our number ones. I'm going to break down why it was for me, Ryan. It really comes down to you have an All-American there in Howard Cross. And you could say, okay, well, you've got a very experienced veteran coming back at corner who's an All-American talent cover player. You've got a very veteran guy coming to linebacker. You've got returning production at end. You've got a unanimous All-American to safety. It's the what's next. What's next is you have another starter coming back who on a per snap basis was every bit as productive as your All-American nose tackle was last year in Riley Mills, who still has a chance to get better, in my opinion, as you broke down earlier. The other part of it too is the uncertainty that was the depth at defensive tackle a year ago is now no longer a question mark, Ryan, because all those guys got a chance to play.
Right.
Jason Onye, played a decent amount this past season. Donovan Heinisch played a decent amount this past season. Like Notre Dame does not have Gabriel Rubio this spring, but they've already had to learn to play without Gabriel Rubio because he missed 4 games last year with injuries. So we've already seen Jason Onye be thrust into that role. We've seen Donovan Heinisch be thrust into that role. They returned 2 defensive tackles behind those guys that played 100 snaps or more a season ago, and Jason Onye and Donovan Heinisch. And so I'm going through a 2 deep of guys that have played before I start having to talk about the unproven, really talented younger players. Whereas a linebacker, it's like starters are going to be unproven guys. Cornerback, they're going to have starters that are unproven guys. Very talented, but unproven. Whereas at that defensive tackle, it's like Armo Mukum is the Drake Bowen of the defensive tackle unit. They don't need him to play this year. Right? Brennan Vernon, that's a top 150 caliber recruit that we're not even talking about because there's so much experience ahead of him. Same with Devin Houston. 3-4 years ago, Ryan, we're spending most of our D tackle conversation talking about those 3 guys. Sure. Because they're now the depth. They have to step up so that Riley Mills and Howard Cross don't have to play 70 snaps a game. Now it's like, if they step up, great. It's awesome. But if they don't, they're okay. Right. And so to me, it's not just the 1-2 impact of Cross and Mills is enough to put them number 1. But the reason they were the clear number 1 for me is the depth behind them. Because at cornerback, if there's an injury to Gray or Mickey, the depth behind it is a lot more uncertain right now. for me.
Right.
You've got to go either a veteran like Clarence Lewis that we know can't play at that level against like the top teams, or you got to thrust a Leonard Moore, Carson Hobbs type of guy. Well, they're not even on campus right now. So to me, that's why I look at defensive tackle. The high level talent is really good, but the depth is they're in the best two deep situation of any position group on the entire team,
Yeah,
arguably.
I would
And
agree.
then the third team guys are really talented younger players that if for some reason Donovan Heinisch or Jason Onye aren't two deep players, it's because one of those studs passed them up. That's a great place to be. And if they don't, you're money with Jason Onye and Donovan Heinisch's backups. Because Donovan Heinisch impressed me last year. He got swallowed up a little bit at times, but he showed me the same motor his brother has. He shows me the kind of quickness off the ball that Howard Cross has made Howard Cross so effective. And he
Mhm.
played, I mean, he played I don't think Howard Cross played over 100 snaps until his third year in past years. So you're talking about just a position with just excellent depth. And if you're going to have a position with great depth, no, I'm sorry, Howard Cross played 166 snaps in year 2. So he did play more snaps than Donovan Heinisch did in year 2. But didn't play as many as Jason Onye did in his first year in the rotation. So I feel really good about where this group is at defensive tackle. And if you're going to have a foundation to build your defense around, it's a good place to be when you can say the interior of your defensive line is your best position group. And it just shows kind of how far this team has come in the
Right.
last few years with that,
Well,
Ryan.
and the only way I'll finish this conversation, and I know you want to rank the full position groups before we get out of here, but I would say it very easily like this to kind of put in context of how deep the defensive line is that sometimes and often when I start listing the interior defensive linemen on the roster, I end up forgetting a player or two. Like that's the depth that they have been
Who's
able to
pretty
create
talented.
here. Right. It's like, oh, you might forget to mention Brendan Vernon one time or Armand Mukum or Devin Houston. It's like, okay, well, that was a 4-star top 150 type of dude, like a top 250 type of dude, whoever you're
One
talking
of those
about. I mean,
guys
so
was your highest upside player on the entire
exactly.
defense in the 2023 class, and Armo Mukum. That was your number one guy, right? I
And
mean,
and and you don't need any of those guys to break out in
mhm.
2024. Like to put it into perspective, that's how much depth you have at defensive tackle. So yes, it's becoming an embarrassment of riches. I mean, you are steadily closing the gap between the premier programs in college football and where your defensive line depth is starting to get to. And that was a spot that needed to get more depth. Because even when Notre Dame's have really good defensive lines, you mentioned it, but it's like if an injury or two happens, then you're in a little bit of a tough situation there, right?
Mhm.
As far as the just be able to assimilate and to be able to move forward with the depth you have. So yes, I agree. Defensive tackle is number one of the defensive rankings. Now I know Brian wanted to combine the two lists, so he did an offensive list yesterday, ranking the offensive positions. We just did the defensive rankings. So if we put those two together, Brian, how would this rank as a team-wide positional perspective heading into spring?
So I'm going to do a quick refresher on what my 5 was on at offensive, Ryan, and I'd be curious if you have any major disagreements. I'd like to hear it. I have tight end number 5 because again, no Mitchell Evans. So and I don't count Kevin Bauman because I don't know where he is right now. I had offensive line number 4, wide receiver number 3, quarterback number 2, running back number 1. That was how I ranked my 5. So here's how I'd rank my any major disagreements with those, Ryan?
No, no.
Comfortable with those? Okay.
Yep.
Kind of like defense, you might flip one here or there, but nothing major there. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Here's my 10 overall. I'm going tight end at the bottom at 10. The reason why is, again, no Mitchell Evans. So there's no
Mm-hmm.
Xavier Watts to counter what you have there. Now, the counter argument would be where I thought about this was, but Eli Raridan and Cooper Flanagan have played a lot more meaningful snaps than a Don Schuler and Luke Talich and Ben Minnick. But the
Right.
gap between the top guy, there, if Mitchell Evans was back in the spring, the tight end's not anywhere close to being at the bottom. But because there's no Mitchell for the spring, I got tight end 10. I've got safety 9. I've got linebacker 8. I've got offensive line 7. Again, it's the uncertainty of who's going to play where at linebacker. I have defensive end number 6. I have wide receiver number 5,
Okay.
quarterback number 4,
Mm-hmm.
running back number 3, and then defense in my top 2 spots at cornerback and D tackle. The reason I went I think the bottom of the depth chart at running back is better than the bottom of the depth chart at cornerback. The difference is there's no Benjamin Morrison that's already an established All-American caliber player at running back. That's why
Sure.
I went with cornerback at number 2 over running back, and then of course D tackle is my number 1 overall group. The biggest difference between the defense and the offense, Ryan, and why the offense is ranked lower is because there's so much the talent on offense is really good, but it's so much unproven talent where you have more established. We know what Xavier Watts can do. We
Right.
know what Benjamin Morrison can do. We know what Jack Kaiser can do. We know what the D lineman can do. But that's my 10. So tight end, safety, bottom to top, 10 to 1. Tight end, safety, linebacker, offensive line, defensive end, wide receiver, quarterback, running back, cornerback, defensive tackle. That's where I'm at.
There you have it. There you
I was
have
going
it.
to ask you, Ryan, before we go,
Yeah.
who would you rank higher, quarterback or running back going into the spring? Because I was a little back and forth on that because Riley is a more proven than the running
Yeah.
backs, but because he only played half a year last year. So I can tell by your face that you're having the same back and forth battle I did
Yeah.
determining between those two groups.
I would probably defer to quarterback just because I have seen what Riley Leonard can do in a full season in college, right? So, and we also did see a little glimpse. I know it wasn't against the most healthy or intact Oregon State team in the world, but we did see Steve Angeli do some really good things. And you got a couple other really talented quarterbacks that are obviously there in the spring. So I would probably go quarterback higher than running back, but it is a conversation because both those rooms are extremely talented, obviously.
What's funny is if it wasn't for the Oregon State game, I would have gone with quarterback.
In what way? What does that mean?
Because of how good because of how good Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love were as a duo in that Oregon State game.
Oh, gotcha.
You know, with
Yeah.
Jadarian, because like you mentioned, Steve Angeli as evidence for quarterback, and that's very fair because he played pretty well in his first start. But Jadarian going over 100, Jeremiah doing his thing, catching the touchdown pass. Jabron Payne comes in. They had almost 200 yards of offense at the running back.
Mhm.
That not even counting the kick return from Jadarian Price. So
Yep.
that was the thing for me is was that right there. But I did struggle. My 1-2
Mhm.
on defense was pretty like I was confident in that one. My 1-2
Yep.
on offense, I was a little less confident because you know how high I am on Riley Leonard and obviously the younger players. But man, that running
Yep.
back room is nuts. It is
It's
just
very deep.
nuts. It is very,
Very
very
deep.
good. Very, very good. And honestly, the thing I argued yesterday, Ryan, I don't value experience as much at running back as I do
Mhm.
quarterback. Like I don't I need to have a core. I want to have a quarterback that's played.
Right.
A running back, I don't care. I don't care as
Sure.
much about that as I do, and same with receiver. They're just not positions where experience is needed. That's why I'm a lot like you could make a case that the overall talent at offensive line is as good as it is at running back with Charles Jagasaw guy, but I value experience a lot more at that position
Sure.
than I do running back.
Very fair.
So it's going to be fun. So Ryan.